The world's most iconic American sports car was on the verge of extinction. Sales had tumbled to just 20,000 a year, rival brands were making Corvettes look outdated, and GM held secret meetings about pulling the plug. The C5 was supposed to be a revolutionary reset, with a rear transaxle, a hydroformed chassis, and a purpose-built future. But what should have made the Corvette unstoppable ended up trapping it in a comfort zone most never saw coming. How did a bold comeback become a cautionary tale for Detroit's greatest nameplate? The answer starts at a crossroads few outsiders ever knew existed. By the late 1990s, the Corvette was no longer the standard bearer it once claimed to be. Annual sales had slipped to around 20,000 units, a sharp drop from the glory days. In showrooms, the C4 sat surrounded by rivals that felt fresh and refined, while the Corvette's appeal seemed frozen in time. Porsche 911 was evolving with each generation, blending precision and comfort. BMW M3 offered interiors that felt more like luxury sedans than stripped-down sports cars. Even Japanese challengers from the Nissan 300ZX to the Toyota Supra were proving that speed did not have to come with trade-offs in reliability or everyday usability. The Corvette's formula, big V8, loud exhaust, brash lines, still drew loyalists, but it was losing ground with younger buyers and critics. Magazine reviews praised its raw power, but called out its dated interior, heavy steering, and lack of finesse. The car had become a symbol of American nostalgia, not progress. For General Motors, this posed a real threat. Internal marketing clinics showed that the Corvette's image was drifting further from what performance buyers wanted. The phrase midlife crisis car appeared in more than one focus group report. Meanwhile, General Motors' own financial troubles were mounting. Executives debated whether a sports car that sold in such small numbers was worth the investment, especially as the company faced billion-dollar losses and tough decisions about what to cut. Behind closed doors, meetings grew tense. Some argued for a radical reinvention. Others quietly suggested that maybe the Corvette's time had passed. At one point, the program was placed on indefinite hold, and talk of cancellation became real enough to spark panic among loyal engineers. The risk was not just about losing a car, it was about losing a piece of American identity. But nostalgia alone could not justify another generation. If the Corvette was going to survive, it needed more than horsepower. It needed a reason to exist in a world that was moving on. The future of America's sports car hung by a thread, and the answer would depend on whether General Motors had the courage and the resources to start over from scratch. Dave Hill knew the numbers did not add up. General Motors accountants were sharpening their knives, and the Corvette program was squarely in their sights. In the winter of 1992, with official funding frozen and the project technically on hold, Hill and his team faced a choice. Wait for the axe, or find another way. They chose the latter. Instead of building a prototype in-house where bean counters could track every dollar, they quietly outsourced the job to a small Michigan outfit called TDM Incorporated. The plan was simple. Build a rolling testbed code named Serve 4 off the books and out of sight. The cost was $1.2 million, a sum that could vanish into the background noise of General Motors' billion-dollar budget woes. This was not just a shell with a Corvette badge. Serve 4 was a fully functional mule, stuffed with the radical ideas Hill's team could not risk pitching in a PowerPoint: a rear-mounted transaxle, a hydroformed chassis, and a suspension setup that promised real balance. The car looked rough, unpainted panels, and mismatched parts, but it moved like nothing else wearing a Corvette badge. At night, under the cover of darkness, Hill arranged a private demonstration for General Motors' top brass. No press, no marketing, just a handful of executives and a stretch of Michigan blacktop. The demo started with a bang. Serve 4 launched down the road, its exhaust echoing off empty warehouses. The car handled with a precision that left the old C4 feeling like a relic. When Hill handed the wheel to the executives, skepticism gave way to grins. They felt the difference immediately. The planted rear end, the absence of the usual squeaks and rattles, the sense that this was a Corvette engineered for the next century, not the last. By the end of the night, the mood had shifted. The C5 was not just another redesign, it was proof that the Corvette could be relevant again if General Motors had the guts to fund it. Hill's gamble paid off. The executives left impressed, and the C5 program earned a reprieve. The secret prototype, built on a shoestring and a prayer, had bought the Corvette one last shot. For the engineers, it meant freedom, at least for a while, to chase the wild ideas that would define the car's future. The story of the C5 would not be about nostalgia after all. It would be about what could happen when a team refused to let the past dictate the future. Packaging was everything. The old Corvette formula, with the engine up front and the transmission just behind, had always left the car nose-heavy, quick in a straight line, but never quite at home in a corner. For the C5, engineers took a risk that would redefine the car's character. They moved the transmission to the rear, linking it to the engine with a rigid aluminum torque tube that ran the length of the chassis tunnel. This was not just a trick borrowed from European exotics. It was a calculated move to solve a problem that had dogged every Corvette before it. The numbers tell the story. By shifting roughly 100 pounds from the front to the rear, the C5 achieved a near-perfect 51-49 front-to-rear weight distribution, verified in General Motors specs, and by independent magazine tests that measured 50.3 to 49.7. For drivers, that meant the car no longer felt like it was dragging its tail through a turn. Instead, it rotated predictably, responding to steering inputs with a balance that had been missing from the Corvette playbook. Dave Hill and his team knew that real-world performance was not just about horsepower. It was about giving the driver confidence, lap after lap. The torque tube itself was a marvel of packaging. By enclosing the driveshaft inside a rigid tube, the engineers created a solid link between the engine and the rear-mounted transaxle. This setup did more than just move weight. It stiffened the entire drivetrain, cutting down on flex and vibration. The result was a car that felt planted, with power delivered to the wheels more efficiently. The narrow profile of the torque tube even freed up interior space, making the C5 more comfortable for tall drivers, and giving engineers the freedom to position the fuel tank low and centered for better handling. Compared to the C4's 57-43 weight split, the C5's nearly even balance changed the way the car could be tuned. Suspension engineers suddenly had a wider window to work with. More aggressive setups became possible without sacrificing stability or comfort. The car could be pushed harder, braked later, and powered out of corners with a poise that rivaled the best from Europe and Japan. This was not just evolution. It was a statement. The rear transaxle and torque tube made the C5 a true driver's car, engineered with intent. It signaled that the Corvette was not content to chase benchmarks anymore. It was ready to set them. At the heart of the C5's transformation was a leap in how the car's structure was built, one that started with a simple question. How do you make a sports car both lighter and stronger without driving up costs or complexity? The answer came from a process that had never touched a Corvette frame: hydroforming. Instead of piecing the chassis together from dozens of stamped and welded panels, engineers shaped the C5's main rails from single pieces of steel tubing, expanded into their final form by high-pressure fluid. These hydroformed box rails ran the length of the car, creating a rigid backbone that tied everything together. The numbers were impossible to ignore. Compared to the outgoing C4, the C5's new hydroformed frame delivered about a 50% increase in torsional rigidity. Where the old car would twist and shudder over bumps, the C5 shrugged them off. This new stiffness wasn't just about bragging rights, it changed what the suspension could actually do. With less flex in the chassis, engineers could dial in sharper geometry, stiffer springs, and more aggressive damping, all without sending harsh vibrations or rattles through the cabin. The result was a car that responded to steering and throttle with a precision the Corvette had never known. Every input from the driver translated more directly to the road. This structural leap had ripple effects throughout the entire design. The improved rigidity made a true convertible possible, something the C4 could never quite pull off without feeling compromised. Noise, vibration, and harshness, the constant companions of older Corvettes, were dramatically reduced. The C5 absorbed road imperfections with a composure that surprised even seasoned critics. For the first time, the Corvette wasn't just fast in a straight line. It could attack corners with confidence, lap after lap, without the body flexing out of shape or the suspension losing its edge. Manufacturing planners faced their own challenges. Hydroforming required new tooling and supplier partnerships, adding about 20% to the cost of the frame compared to traditional methods. But the payoff was clear: a lighter, stronger, and more consistent chassis that set a new standard for American sports cars. The investment in Bowling Green's assembly line paid off, allowing every C5, coupe, convertible, and eventually the Z06 to share the same robust foundation. This backbone didn't just raise the bar for stiffness, it opened up a new world of suspension tuning, letting engineers push the limits of grip and handling. The stage was set for the Z06's legendary cornering performance, but even the base C5 benefited from a level of precision and refinement that had once seemed out of reach. Hydroforming turned the Corvette from a brute force machine into a true athlete, ready to challenge anything the world could throw at it. The LS1 engine was the final piece of the C5 technical puzzle, a power plant designed to fit the new Corvette's ambitions as much as its chassis. It was meant to be the final component in a complete rethink of what an American sports car could be. Gone was the old-school iron block V8. In its place sat a compact all-aluminum 5.7-liter small block that delivered 345 horsepower at launch and up to 350 in later model years. But the numbers only tell part of the story. The LS1 was engineered from the start to work in harmony with the C5 radical new layout. Its low profile helped drop the hood line, slicing through the air with less drag and giving the car a sleeker stance. Its compact size made room for the torque tube and rear transaxle, allowing for that nearly perfect weight balance General Motors had been chasing for decades. Engineers prioritized packaging and reliability. The LS1 was lighter than its predecessor thanks to aluminum heads and an aluminum block, which shaved precious pounds off the nose. This was not just about saving weight, it was about placing every pound where it mattered. The engine's reduced mass up front helped the C5 achieve its 51-49 weight distribution, a figure that put it in the same league as Porsche and Ferrari. The compact pushrod design also meant fewer moving parts, which translated to legendary durability. Owners and mechanics quickly discovered the LS1 could take abuse, track days, long highway runs, even the occasional missed oil change, without complaint. Modern electronics transformed the LS1 into more than just a muscle car motor. Drive-by-wire throttle, coil-near plug ignition, and precise fuel management made it smoother and more responsive than any previous Corvette 5.8. These upgrades did not just improve performance, they made the car easier to live with every day. For the first time, a Corvette could cruise at 70 miles per hour, sipping fuel at 28 miles per gallon on the highway, while still delivering the full force of American V8 power when called upon. The LS1's efficiency was no accident. It was the result of hundreds of hours of dyno testing and computer modeling, all aimed at squeezing out every bit of power and economy. Serviceability mattered too. The LS1's simple layout meant routine maintenance was straightforward, a relief for owners used to the quirks of older Corvettes. This focus on reliability and ease of repair helped broaden the car's appeal beyond die-hard enthusiasts to buyers who wanted performance without headaches. The LS1 was not just a placeholder. Its compact, robust design created a foundation for future high-output variants, setting the stage for what would come next. But in the C5, it was already clear. The engine was not just along for the ride. It was an integral part of a car finely engineered as a whole, not just a collection of fast parts. The C5 technical triad, chassis, transaxle, and LS1 worked together to deliver a Corvette that felt modern, balanced, and ready for anything the world could throw at it. On paper, the C5 Corvette looked like a gamble. On the track, it was a knockout punch. Test drivers lined up at proving grounds and magazine shootouts, eager to pit the new Corvette against the best from Europe and Japan. The stopwatch did not lie. The base C5, with its 345 horsepower LS1 engine and a 6-speed manual, launched from 0 to 60 in about 4.5 seconds, matching or beating cars twice its price. Quarter-mile runs dipped into the low 13-second range at over 108 miles per hour, a benchmark that left critics scrambling for comparisons. Then the true revelation arrived with the Z06 for 2001. Engineers stripped out weight wherever they could, thinner glass, magnesium wheels, a titanium exhaust, even a lighter battery and seats, shaving nearly 80 pounds compared to the standard coupe. The LS6 engine, a reworked version of the LS1, delivered 385 horsepower at first, then 405 horsepower by 2002. Suddenly, the Z06 was hitting 0 to 60 in just 3.9 seconds. The quarter mile ran in 11.9 seconds at 116 miles per hour, putting it in the company of Ferrari 360, Modena, and Porsche 911 Turbo. Lap times told the rest of the story. At Virginia International Raceway, the Z06 posted numbers that embarrassed cars costing twice as much. Car and Driver said it was quicker than the fastest C5 they had ever tested, and quicker than the ZR1. Motor Trend figures backed it up. The Z06 could haul down from 60 to 0 in just 113 feet, and lateral grip consistently topped 1G on the skid pad. Track day regulars found the car could run hard for lap after lap, brakes and tires holding up while rivals faded. The numbers were not just good for a Corvette, they were good, period. The base C5 had a top speed of 175 miles per hour, and the Z06, limited by gearing, had a top speed of 170 miles per hour, enough to get the attention of Autobahn regulars. Fuel economy felt almost like an afterthought, but the C5's 28 miles per gallon highway rating let it cruise from coast to coast on a single tank, something no Italian exotic could claim. Test drivers and journalists did not just praise the stats, they described the car as docile on the street, ferocious on the track. Owners echoed that sentiment, recounting days spent running down Porsches and BMWs at club events, then driving home with the air conditioning blowing cold. The C5's blend of speed, balance, and everyday usability shattered old stereotypes. For the first time, the Corvette was not just fast for the money, it was fast, full stop. The data was undeniable. America's sports car had become a giant killer. Corvette fever swept through dealerships and magazine covers the moment the C5 hit the streets. The press didn't just praise the new car, they treated it like a revolution. Headlines called it the best Corvette ever built. Track results and road tests piled up, each one more enthusiastic than the last. Car and Driver, Motor Trend, and Road and Track ran glowing features, with lap times and acceleration numbers that put the C5 in the company of European legends. For buyers, the message was clear. This wasn't just a fast car, it was a fast car that could finally go toe-to-toe with Porsche and Ferrari, and do it for half the price. Demand soared. The first full model year saw Corvette sales jump by more than 50% compared to the C4's final seasons. The new Z06, added for 2001, only stoked the fire. More than 6,000 units of the Z06 found buyers in its first year, an astonishing number for a high-performance variant that cost less than $50,000. Enthusiast forums and club meetings buzzed with stories of Z06s running down exotics at track days. For the first time in decades, the Corvette wasn't just a fixture at car shows, it was a genuine threat on road courses from Lime Rock to Laguna Seca. Dealers couldn't keep up. Waitlists grew, and some buyers paid over sticker just to get their hands on a Z06. Analysts at General Motors took notice. Internal projections showed the C5 program delivering a 250% improvement in profitability compared to the C4. For a company still recovering from billion-dollar losses, this was more than good news. It was proof that the risk had paid off. The C5 wasn't just saving the Corvette name, it was making money in a way no previous generation had managed. The halo effect was real. Corvette's image rebounded almost overnight. Younger buyers started showing up in greater numbers. Magazine covers trumpeted the Z06 as a giant killer, and even the base model earned respect from critics who once dismissed it as a relic. For General Motors leadership, these numbers sent a clear signal. The C5 wasn't just a technical triumph, it was a commercial one, and that success brought something else, a sense of relief. After years of anxiety, the Corvette program had found its footing. The car was winning over critics, buyers, and accountants all at once, but with the celebration came a subtle shift. The urgent drive to innovate, to push boundaries, began to ease. The C5 had proven that America could build a world-class sports car, and that was enough, at least for now. As the sales charts climbed and the praise rolled in, General Motors grew comfortable in its role as a newly crowned leader. The future, for a moment, looked secure, but the very success that had saved the Corvette was quietly building the foundation for a different kind of challenge, one that would reveal itself as the years went on. The C5 didn't fail. That's what makes the story uncomfortable. It succeeded just enough to convince General Motors they didn't need to push harder. Over time, the car that once felt revolutionary began to feel dated, crude, and culturally out of step. The Corvette C5 was meant to be the future, until progress demanded more than horsepower. By the early 2000s, the definition of a world-class sports car had changed. European and Japanese manufacturers were not just chasing faster lap times, they were reshaping what drivers expected from the entire experience. The 996 Generation 911 arrived with a cabin lined in soft touch materials, digital climate controls, and an optional navigation system. BMW's E46 M3 offered heated leather seats, premium Harman Kardon audio, and a dash layout that felt more like a luxury flagship than a track weapon. Even Nissan's 350Z, launched in 2002, came standard with a Bose sound system, automatic climate control, and switchgear that clicked with precision. The industry was moving toward refinement. Electronic driver aids were quickly becoming the new battleground. Porsche rolled out PSM, Porsche Stability Management, across its lineup, giving drivers a safety net that could intervene seamlessly in emergencies without dulling the car's edge. BMW's dynamic stability control and adaptive M suspension let owners tailor the driving experience to mood and road conditions. By 2001, even mainstream rivals offered advanced traction control, rain-sensing wipers, and side airbags as standard equipment. Stability and control were now part of the package. The Corvette C5, for all its mechanical brilliance, lagged behind in these areas. Its ABS and traction control worked, but stability control did not arrive until 2001, and even then it felt like an afterthought, more a box checked for insurance purposes than a system engineered for confidence. The cabin, while roomier and quieter than before, was dominated by hard plastics and switchgear borrowed from the General Motors parts bin. The dash flexed under pressure, the seats lacked support, and the optional head-up display was a rare glimpse of modernity in an otherwise dated environment. The result was a gap in perception as well as in features. Magazine testers and owners noticed. Road and Track praised the C5's speed, but called its interior a letdown next to the competition. Car and Driver compared the Corvette dash to a rental car. Critics pointed out that while the Z06 could outgun a Ferrari on the track, its cabin felt years behind. No leather-wrapped dash, no Alcantara headliner, no sense of occasion when you climbed inside. Performance was not the only metric anymore, and the C5 was showing its age. Consumer expectations were rising fast. Buyers cross-shopping the Corvette with a 911 or M3 were not just looking for horsepower. They wanted refinement, technology, and a sense that their car was as advanced inside as it was under the skin. Features like automatic climate control, premium sound, and power adjustable, everything became the new normal. Even the 350Z, priced well below the Corvette, delivered a cockpit that felt solid and thoughtfully designed. The market was rewarding comfort and polish as much as speed. General Motors' own internal proposals for richer materials and upgraded tech were often vetoed on cost grounds. Plans for leather-trimmed dashboards and advanced infotainment systems never made it past the accounting department. The C5's cabin, once a step forward from the C4, quickly felt outclassed as the competition moved the goalposts. Where the Corvette had once led, it now appeared reactive. On the road, the difference was just as clear. Where the Corvette delivered raw speed and balance, its rivals offered quiet rides, intuitive controls, and a sense of polish that made every drive feel special, whether on a mountain pass or a daily commute. The experiential gap widened each year, not because the Corvette got worse, but because the rest of the world moved faster. Speed alone was no longer the whole story. By the time the C5's run ended in 2004, the message was impossible to ignore. Performance alone was no longer enough. The new standard demanded that speed be paired with comfort, technology, and emotional design. The Corvette, once the benchmark, now risked becoming the outlier, brilliant on the track, but missing the mark where it mattered most to a new generation of drivers. The Z06's arrival proved that a bold leap could pay off. Yet inside GM, that lesson soon faded. With sales strong and magazines hailing the Corvette as a world beater, the impulse to take risks vanished almost overnight. Executives who once feared for the car's survival now saw it as a reliable profit center. The C5's 250% projected margin improvement over the C4 gave finance chiefs exactly what they wanted: predictability. For the first time in years, the Corvette program wasn't fighting for its life. It was delivering on the bottom line, but stability came at a cost. While the Z06 was still fresh in buyers' minds, engineers and designers quietly proposed the next revolution: a true mid-engine Corvette. The idea wasn't new. Studio sketches and technical proposals for a mid-engine layout had circulated inside GM since the 1960s, resurfacing every few years when a new generation seemed within reach. After the C5's success, these plans finally gained traction. A mid-engine architecture promised even better weight distribution, a lower center of gravity, and the kind of exotic appeal that could keep the Corvette ahead of the curve. Yet, when it came time to allocate resources, the answer was always the same: weight. The numbers drove every decision. The C5's sales had rebounded, peaking at 37,000 units in 2000. Z06 demand ran hot, with buyers lining up and dealers charging premiums. GM's financial analysts pointed to these figures as proof that the formula worked. Why gamble on a radical new architecture when the current car was still moving off lots? Why risk alienating loyal buyers with a layout that might seem too European, too unfamiliar? The mid-engine Corvette was shelved again and again, its engineering teams reassigned to incremental updates. Each time the idea surfaced, it ran headlong into a wall of conservatism. The C6, launched in 2005, stuck with the C5's basic bones: front engine, rear transaxle, hydroformed chassis. The interior was tweaked, the body sharpened, but the architecture remained unchanged. Even the C7, introduced in 2014, followed the same path. For more than 2 decades after the C5's debut, the Corvette's fundamental layout stayed locked in place. The world outside didn't stand still. Porsche pushed ahead with all-wheel drive, turbocharging, and ever more sophisticated electronics. Ferrari embraced dual-clutch gearboxes and carbon fiber tubs. Nissan's GT-R rewrote the rules on what a mass-produced supercar could do. Yet at GM, the urge to protect what had worked always outweighed the urge to reinvent. The Corvette kept getting faster, but the definition of progress had moved on. The consequences of that caution became impossible to ignore. By the late 2010s, even die-hard fans were asking why America's sports cars still clung to tradition while rivals embraced the future. The answer traced back to the decisions made in the wake of the C5's success. The car that was meant to be a starting point for constant innovation became a comfort zone, a place where good enough was suddenly good enough. The mid-engine Corvette didn't arrive until 2020, nearly a quarter century after the C5 showed what was possible. By then, the world had changed and the Corvette was playing catch-up. The future that once seemed within reach had slipped away, not with a bang, but with years of careful, calculated delay. Today, automotive benchmarks are set by relentless innovation, including hybrid drivetrains, digital cockpits, and design that stirs emotion. The C5's lesson is clear. Speed alone cannot guarantee relevance. Progress rewards those who reinvent, not just outperform. As electric and autonomous technology rewrite the rules, legacy means nothing without evolution. The next revolution demands more than horsepower. It is about daring to redefine what greatness looks like. What risks will shape the icons of tomorrow? Drop your thoughts in the comments.